This is Aubrey Bettencourt, President and CEO of the Almond Alliance, and welcome to Almond Alert. Anja, I think this is your show too.
That's right. This is Anja Raudabaugh. I'm the CEO of Western United Dairies, and welcome to Seen and Heard, information for the modern dairy family.
Look at that. This is just a melding of the minds and a joining of forces, and that's really what we're here to talk about today. For, I think, the first time ever, you and I are publicly allowed to discuss something we've been privately working on for so long, and that is DWR's recently announced Landflex program. For those of you who have seen the press releases, DWR is reaching into the groundwater world and into the drought relief world in a new and innovative way with a program called Landflex, working with farmers voluntarily to provide immediate drought response and mitigation for domestic and rural wells, while simultaneously creating an inventive new tool to allow for SGMA compliance and what a post-2040 SGMA world looks like in our critically overdrafted basins and beyond. A lot of folks have heard us talk about this in different milieus. It's been rumored, it's been talked about, I think, behind closed doors for almost a year now. But we're really here to talk about what the program is. Western United and Almond Alliance, along with Self-Help Enterprises and CAF, have been listed as the 4 technical support providers. But really, the backstory of that is a lot of history between these two organizations leaning in the middle of a drought with our incredible water managers at the state level to say we need to come up with a new tool in the toolkit to help folks on the ground be part of the solution and start providing real water, wet water, into our aquifers and into our system, this idea of conjunctive use, which I'm the geek on the water side, so you're going to hear me use geeky water words. But really, we're here to talk about kind of the history of that, what the program is, and what the timeline looks like going forward as we enter this public comment period through December 29th. So, Anja, thank you so much. And I guess thank you for having me and vice versa.
Well, thanks for agreeing to leave Washington, D.C. back for your hometown of California. We've been kind of soft launching this for a couple months now. It's been a stop and go process as we've responded to stakeholder concerns, stakeholder engagement. I mean, to be truthful, I think a lot of people didn't think that this was actually going to go. So they weren't very engaging, and that's okay. You know, we're all suspicious old buffaloes in the water world. And I think coming in with this new integrative approach, it's definitely something different. And looking at this project from start to finish, Aubrey, you and I, we established several guardrails that we knew we needed to hit right out the door. And that throughout the negotiations, those guardrails were routinely tested, flexed, bent. But I think that the political process will teach all of us that we need to stick to our principles even when things are tough, but we do have to be flexible so that we bring as many stakeholders to the table as we can. And everybody got a present under the Christmas tree this go around. And we're looking to make a bigger Christmas tree next time. But I think it's important to kind of remind everybody that when we leave water in the ground, when we have and ask farmers to voluntarily fallow, that what we're doing is creating more certainty for domestic drinking well water supplies throughout that system. And that was the first guardrail that we knew we needed to hit with Landflex, which was whatever we did, we had to tie it to the public policy nexus of providing certainty around domestic drinking water well supplies. Farmers in the Central Valley have come under a lot of criticism, rightfully so, of perhaps overdrafting. There are many technical reasons why they've had to do that. But generally speaking, the system as it stands today is unsustainable. And so then the second guardrail we knew we needed to hit was that people needed to be appropriately compensated for the groundwater that they were giving up. This was by far the biggest fight throughout the negotiations, but we feel the end result was something that really guaranteed certainty to both the farmer and the state that they were entering into an arrangement that compensated them for their crops, for their land value, and essentially helping them make payroll, which is really the other guardrail we wanted to hit, which how do we keep our farmers going through SGMA, going through this evolution of reducing their dependency on groundwater solvent? How do we keep them farming? Because Aubrey and I cease to exist if we put our guys out of business. And so there was really a mindset there that we wanted to mitigate for the impact that the drought is having on these domestic communities, but also balance that landing for the farmers. And I think the third piece that we successfully brought together using DWR as kind of guardrail, which was they wanted faster SGMA compliance. Whatever they needed to do as they looked at Landflex throughout the summer of 2022, they knew they needed to land on a SGMA compliance mechanism. And so in order to do that, we really had to roll up our sleeves, work with our wonderful farmers and our partners at the table, specifically the GSAs that have had existing groundwater allocations in place, and see what we could do to make SGMA go faster. Because the criticism, and again, we're now in the third year of a really bad drought cycle of SGMA, is that it's been too slow to implement, and full implementation is not scheduled till 2040, with a lot of our guys transitioning down on a glide path of using groundwater overdraft. And so we wanted to see what would motivate people faster to eliminate that glide path. And so again, coming up with appropriate compensation to wipe those credits off the books was really important. So I think maybe, Aubrey, you and I can break down the deal, and then we can talk about what it's going to look like the next month and a half.
Yeah, I think you touched on those key components so well, and I don't want to minimize the level of literal, hands-on, tactile policy making that was taking place here. What is so incredible about what this program is and does is there is this misnomer that fallowing equals water. And that's not always the case. We can fallow, any good farmer out there knows, I can fallow 1,000 acres and have minimal water savings. But I can fallow acres in the right place at the right time and maximize the water savings. And so what is so, I think, important about Landflex from a policy perspective is, I think you said it so brilliantly in one meeting we had, which is unlike any other program, drought response program geared towards ag, this actually is about the water. And it measures and pays based on the unit of water. And I think that's a really great transition, because that's so important to the way we think about water management going forward and how we keep our farmers whole. The whole idea behind even the name Landflex is the idea that we may have to fallow a million acres post 2040 in the SGMA world, but we needed a tool that said it didn't have to necessarily be permanent to get us the water savings that we needed if we looked at it in terms of water instead of acreage. And that's really where Landflex is going, is challenging us as water managers, both at the GSA level and as a farmer and as the state, to say, let's relook at this in a way that gets us to our savings faster, sooner, better, starts proving we can support the aquifer and supporting the idea of conjunctive use management, which is that surface to groundwater nexus. So let's dive into the details of how
I wanted to touch on like what the focus on saving water really meant, though.
Right.
If you think about existing programs that DWR and Department of Conservation have rolled out, they focus way too much on the number of acres being fallowed, which absolutely does not translate into numbers of acre feet of water quantity saved. And so we identified to DWR that that was a serious flaw in their thinking, and it was not easy.
No.
There has been, if you think about the historic nature of fallowing projects, specifically down in Palo Verde Irrigation District along the Colorado River, and even up here in the Delta in California, they've only ever been paid per acre, and they've never been able to quantify how much water they saved in doing that. They always estimated, and they said, well, we think we're saving about, 213,000 acre feet. But when you ask them to prove that, they couldn't. And again, out of respect, I'm not trying to criticize anyone. And the multi-benefit habitat repurposing program is an excellent example of a tool in the SGMA basket that allows GSAs and water managers to set aside land to potentially sink additional water. But it does not provide any immediate relief to the aquifer. And it also cannot, with any good faith, quantify what they could save if they were measuring it on acre foot.
Nope,
and so I think that I wanted to dwell on that. This was really the reason why it took Landflex so long to be born, is because the negotiation hardliners, Aubrey and I, would not compromise on that principle. And so I think we did well
Yep.
And I think that Landflex hopefully will be a model to turn up or dial down the certain areas that we're about to cover, because saving the water is really how we demonstrate to the taxpayer that their money was well spent.
Well, and it's ultimately all of this is about the water. And I think too, you said it, the Sigma toolkit. So many of the Valley GSPs were getting kicked back because what? They didn't address groundwater demand reduction.
Right.
And the GSPs we talked to all said, I don't have a tool to do this. I don't have a practical tool. And we totally empathize with you being on your GSA board and saying, I have to regulate my neighbor. That's not an easy position to put someone in. And I think while we love local control, that was one of the challenges. And so we were really hoping to find a tool that we could put in the toolkit for the GSAs that could be accurate and appropriate in a market setting to allow our farmers to transition well, and start thinking in a different time cycle around how they crop plan, how they manage, how they're managing that bank of water in their account. And to your point, you mentioned the program in the Delta, you mentioned the program in Palo Verde. We talked to all those guys throughout this process. I mean, we really did. I don't want to underestimate how much due diligence we did in the amazing network of people we have talked to, and how this really sets an interesting platform for us to build on. And what I love about it is it's ag and farmers getting to lean in and voluntarily solve a problem where we've been vilified in a lot of ways. So I think it's actually a great tool for us to lean in and own Sigma and do what we do best, which is solve problems and continue to do what we do. So let's get into it. What is Landflex? How does it break down?
It has three major pillars, and each of them does something very specific as far as setting the public policy objective and meeting it. The first one is immediate drought relief, and that is the farmer being paid per acre foot of water that he saves when he fallows. So the grower or farmer in this case, if he fallows an acre of almonds, on average, those use around 5 acre feet per acre. He is to be paid. Oh, no, they don't?
3.5 acre feet.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me.
Now, right. Hold on. I'm almond world.
Well, let me use my example then. A dairy farmer who's double cropping corn and wheat will use approximately 5 acre feet per acre. And the Landflex program incentivizes him to follow that, saving that 5 acre feet per acre that he would be drawing out of the aquifer. The farmer will be paid $450 per acre foot that he fallows for demand reduction on the emergency drought side. So that's one pillar. The second pillar is particularly important from a public policy standpoint. We do not want these basins to go back into immediate cycles of overdraft. So they are going to be incentivized to transition away from that high overdrafted amount of water they're using, bringing it down. So let's say if they're shifting from wheat and corn, they can simply grow wheat or tomatoes for, let's say, 1.5 foot per acre in the future, staying within their sustainable yield allocation that the Groundwater Sustainability Agency has given them. And so the transition payment is paid per acre, and it ranges between $250 per acre to $2,800 per acre, depending on the nature of the transition. So for trees, tree crops, vines, it's a very intensive transition. The trees have to be pulled out, they have to be mulched, the ground has to be prepared. There's a lot of additional things there. For dairy farms, on the transition side, we have to upcycle our products. We have to go out and buy almond hulls, citrus pulp and peel, bakery waste, which is very popular in the northern part of the state. That all costs money. And so for that year, one time, that farmer will be paid a per acre transition rate. And then the third component of Landflex is what we call the sustainable yield payment. And the sustainable yield payment is a payment towards the transition of that basin. So the farmer basically sells his transition credit or credits to DWR for the bargain price of $750 per acre foot. Now, some people have more transition credits because they've either come into compliance early with Sigma or have attempted to accelerate their glide path down to 0 acre-feet of overdraft pumping. So they may have more transition credits because maybe their GSA or their irrigation district bought water and sunk it. We're trying not to punish those folks. We want to make sure, the whole vision of Sigma is a more equitable allocation of groundwater. So if they have more transition credits to sell that they're willing to, great, but they don't have to sell them all on that acre. But we do want to make sure that their permanent bank accounts are drawn down forever. So they're never going to get that acre foot that they sell to the state back. They're always going to accelerate their transition to Sigma faster.
Right. Until the basin reaches a healthy aquifer level or starts exceeding that 2015 level, which is what you got to remember, Sigma is saying get your aquifer back to a 2015 depth of water. Yep. If the basin is managed appropriately, if something like this accelerates the ability to get you to that point, the idea being a reappropriation of the groundwater pumping credits. So you may be stuck at a 0.6 acre foot per acre right now, but if you can get your aquifer healthy,
totally.
The idea being that your GSA can come in, reappropriate that water, you may be up to 1.5 or whatever it may be. So yes, you are eliminating the overdraft transition early. You voluntarily will sell that credit in the hopes that, and immediately, let me rephrase this. You voluntarily are eliminating that credit and you are immediately within Sigma compliance.
Correct.
At that point, you're operating in a post-2040 world. The idea being that GSA can get that aquifer nice and healthy through, heaven help us, it's raining right now. We've got good snowpack. We get that water moving again. We can get some groundwater recharge in a flood situation. We can accelerate the conservation of leaving the water in the ground. And then that aquifer becomes a more healthy aquifer and you get your pumping reappropriated. It's a new way of thinking. And I think for the farmer, it's a new tool to be thinking long-term and cyclical about the rotation on their farm of the water credits that they have. And I know the farmers that we ran this cycle through, and we looked at folks in different aquifers. We looked at folks in different cropping patterns, and it all became a tool that they instantly, I think, how many times we talked to a farmer and instantly they went, I can rework the next 12 years and I can keep myself whole in this process. So I think some key things. Yeah, I think some key things to keep in mind here. One is that it's voluntary and it's temporary. I think those have been two big words that we've talked about in the sense of it's a 1-year contract. It's right now, correct?
Correct.
Right.
So it's a 1-year contract for 2 out of the 3.
Yes.
But if you hit the third period, so we should really make sure that our audience, because I think this is going to be pretty wide beyond just agriculture. The first 2 pieces, the fallowing on the ET side and the transition piece, are essentially a 1-year contract. Right. But when you sign up to sell DWR, your transition credit or credits,
that's a retirement. Yes,
that's a retirement of that credit forever. And so for some farmers and growers, this may not be the right decision because, again, we're sensitive to the fact that this is their bank account. This is far more important, these transition credits over time for a lot of people than others. This is their ability to have a family farm in the future. And that shouldn't be lost on this discussion. This is why we want to make sure this is voluntary. For as many people that it can work for, that they can make this decision ahead of schedule, we think it's going to hit quite a few of the middle grounders. And that's what, to Aubrey's point, will really help basin-wide compliance with Sigma advance early. But there are going to be some folks who are really, really strapped and they're farming by the skin of their teeth. And unfortunately, we just couldn't design a program that helped everybody at this time.
So let's get into the structure here. So there are qualified, let me rephrase, eligible GSAs that will apply, correct?
Correct.
All right. So an
GSA eligibility hinges on their ability to not have only adopted a groundwater allocation methodology, but have implemented it. So there have been quite a few GSAs that have been a little bit ahead of the curve. They decided they wanted to control the size and style of the knife. So they adopted early implementation of a glide path to 0. Essentially, this is how much the farmers are allowed to pump over the sustainable yield down towards the sustainable yield. Every single basin is really different. Some of them, can pump a little bit more. Some of them can pump a little bit less. Really depends on how much they were over dependent on groundwater in the first place. And so GSAs for this, especially as this initial tranche of money, those that can qualify will have already adopted and implemented a groundwater pumping methodology. So yeah, really important to point out that not all GSAs will qualify. This is supposed to incentivize those that are a little bit slower to do some of this early adoption to get there. We want their farmers to be excited about it.
Yeah, this is a new tool that some of those GSAs just couldn't figure into, right? So our hope is, I think, that those GSAs would have that opportunity now that they can see this piece playing in. So to be clear, overly simplified, an eligible GSA is a GSA that has an established sustainable yield with a quantified overdraft credit appropriated to all of its growers within its GSA. Correct.
And DWR is set to release that specific set of criteria in the next few days or weeks. So to be clear, DWR may tweak that just a hair, but the general concept behind Landflex is to make sure that that's where we start.
Right. So we're looking specifically in our critically overdrafted basins. Hopefully one day this will scale out to our our moderate basins. We really do want to see this, I think, scale. It's designed to do that. So the GSAs will apply for a block grant from the state, correct? The eligible GSAs.
Correct. So first, the eligibility criteria will be released. I believe it's in January. And then those GSAs that are eligible will then apply for this funding. Yes.
So the GSA, I think there is also one other criteria for a GSA, which is they have to be using some sort of evapotranspiration or measurement tool. Correct?
Correct. So the two tools that most people use are either OpenET or LandIQ. Now, there is one other that DWR said they were open to considering. So I guess it would be technology that is similar, but those are the two commonly associated ones.
Right. Again, coming back to we're paying per acre foot. So you have to have technology to verify the acre foot demand on the property. Okay. So GSA eligible, applies, gets a block grant. Then the farmer in that, so that means everyone in there that program is now available to them within that GSA, correct?
Correct.
All right. So then the farmer, which there will be applicant trainings, I believe, for the GSAs, as well as broader outreach.
On January 19th.
In January, that's right, that we've been planning. So January 19th, applicant trainings. They will then be able to apply online through a virtual portal, utilizing their existing documentation in a lot of ways. And these portals will dovetail and have all of the resources for the accepted GSAs available to the farmer. So when the farmer logs in, they'll be able to find their GSA, their specific evapotranspiration rates for their GSA, links to the Sigma Viewer, which is a DWR tool, which will help them identify their proximity to domestic wells and rural water systems, which is their scoring criteria once their application is turned in. So the farmer selects their property. It's 40 acres or up to 25% of their entity. Their entity. There is an adjusted gross income criteria of $2.5 million per entity that applies, using the same criteria that we would use for USDA in terms of calculating that. We tried to keep this
over a 3-year average. So
correct. The 3-year average.
You can exceed 2.5 over 3 years in order to qualify. So if you do, then you won't be eligible for this program.
Right. Again, trying to keep this as familiar to existing programs out there. You'll use your 578 form from FSA, which is your acreage reporting form. So if you are not out there doing your acreage reporting, you need to get out there and do your acreage reporting. That coordinates with the property that you wish to enroll. The farmer will populate this form, drop in all of this information, pull in the criteria referencing the Sigma Viewer. There'll be trainings for all of this. And then that gets submitted to the GSA for scoring. Now can we talk a little bit about the scoring criteria? Are we able to?
I think it's important.
Yeah, I think
Going back to what we opened up with, which was the
this is
public
about
policy
domestic.
nexus.
That's
Yeah,
right.
the public policy nexus has to be on preserving domestic drinking water wells.
Well, and that was the underlying foundation of Sigma. So, I mean, truly, this is a Sigma compliance tool plus a drought mitigation tool. So, let's get into the scoring criteria. Scoring criteria is based, overly simplified, based on the enrolled property's proximity to domestic well or rural water systems. Correct?
Yep.
So, those who are closest to those types of infrastructure are scored higher.
Yep.
Simple as that.
So closer and closer to the number of connections. So if you do fall into some of these special categories of public supply wells or clusters of wells, and there's actually some links to the existing Landflex page, which is water.ca.gov/Landflex, to the State Water Resources Control Board definitions of some of these public supply well clusters. But to your point, the closer you are to these domestic wells, whether it's clusters or 1 or 2 or 5, the higher you will be scored as a farmer.
Now, are we first come, first serve at that point?
That's the way I understand it, that they will be done in batches. And so a couple of things to additionally point out on the initial allocation of the 25 million. It will be limited to 2 or 3 GSAs that have some achievements in these areas, meaning they have already implemented a groundwater accounting methodology far in advance of some others, because I think the idea is to demonstrate year over year results in these spaces. And so DWR was a little hesitant to initially start off just as a statewide program. And so we wanted to really narrow it down to something that we can show results on in the next few months, and then show that there's a demand for this. Aubrey and I know there's a demand for this because we talk to farmers every day, but in their defense, DWR has never done anything like this before. So they're really beta testing it.
Well, the nice thing is it's not a pilot. So I think we've proven concept quite well, and we can't thank our partners, especially the GSAs, the Sigma team, some of our rural communities. I mean, it's just been exceptional. I think what really bringing those different pieces together and said, wow, this was the missing piece in this process that we're going through from a water management perspective, and really have to commend the leadership at DWR for their courage to go down this rabbit hole of a year of tooling this. I mean, really getting into, there were a lot of whiteboards, folks, a lot of whiteboards involved. But have to commend the leadership at DWR, Director Namath and her whole team and the Sigma team. Truly the collaboration and the level of detail in a positive way. And this has been a positive experience. This has been a positive, we really have to try something new. Am I missing anything else? Can we go over the timeline?
Yeah, we should go over the timeline. And I think that for audience purposes, we really want to encourage comments to DWR. So the comment period is open. It opened on Friday. Again, that link, water.ca.gov/Landflex, you can essentially email your comments in. If you are a GSA listening to this message, or work on a board of GSAs, or work with GSAs, we really encourage your feedback, because we tried to execute what we thought would work. There's a lot of partners that have been involved that have also been providing extensive feedback on what would work, but you never know where the next good idea is going to come from. And if there are some immediate tweaks that we think we need to make for this program, be loud and heard. We should definitely entertain that. I know DWR really wants to hear from people associated with the GSAs or the GSAs themselves about, because they're literally putting the dots and the crossing the T's on the criteria selection for the GSAs. And so right now it's very narrow, but perhaps there are some good reasons to open that up a little bit wider. I know that there's a lot of money that's been set aside for this. They're just introducing it slowly in tranches, and obviously going into, we came from a massive surplus this year at the state level, and we're being cautious about 2023. I think the state is. And so there's a little bit of let's prove the concept conversation. And so the more feedback that we get, the comment period will close on December 29th, which is about the fastest comment period. And it is Christmas time, so we know these are not like the ideal times, but we were successful in chatting with our partners at DWR that they've already missed at least like one water season. We don't want to miss another one. And I think that right now, irrespective of how much it rains, the aquifers in the valley are so depleted that we need like historic rain every day for the next, 3 years to kind of make up for that. So at the moment, I've had a lot of farmers go, oh my God, it's raining again. Is Landflex still going to be the same? And the plan is, yes, it's still going to be the same. And this was Aubrey's idea to make sure that the program would scale up or scale down. Even a year that we have good hydrology, we wanted to be able to, at a lower rate, incentivize people to sink water in those cases, which is brilliant. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I'll let you keep going on a compliment. That works perfect. No, I think what's critical is the program. We often talk that even in a wet year, this program actually becomes more valuable. And the importance is we all know as a farmer on the ground and as a GSA that you have to have a tool like this in place, because the question has always been not what happens because it's dry. That's immediate triage. That's the immediate stop pumping, right? Yeah. Protect domestic wells. That's what you do in a drought. How you recover from a drought, what happens when it rains, that's the most important policy question that has to be asked. And that's why a tool like this becomes a valuable tool to the state as well as to the regional water managers of how to think about addressing hydrology through different years over time. So the what happens when it rains question to me is always one that I wake up every morning. You always tell me about, what keeps you up at night. I tell you, I wake up every morning going, what happens when it rains? And we are always, as advocates, constantly looking for that regulatory certainty. And that what happens when it rains question to me is the scariest question, because I don't have that certainty. These types of programs and tools help us get to that place as water managers and as land managers as well, and community managers. I mean, we're all in this together in that mindset and in that working together. So as we scale into what we have right now is an open comment period. We really want GSAs to respond to this. Look at this with a fine tooth comb and tell us if this works for you. Tell us if, I would really want to hear from GSAs who look at this and say, okay, I've got to get my GSA to this point so I can use this tool. That type of feedback is critical to DWR understanding the scale they need to make this program. To Anja's point, the program right now is being released in a small tranche. It's a permanent program, but it's being released in a small tranche for proof of concept. We want to see it scale. It's designed to scale. So other critical basins, I encourage you to give feedback about, and be thinking about how to start implementing a program like this. And if it's a program that works for you, you need to be asking for it and what scale you would need it at. And your moderate overdrafted basins, you guys that don't need to be in compliance for another 10 years, think about how this plays into your water management portfolio and the idea of the tools that you need on the ground for that, getting your aquifer to a healthier level in a quicker time. I know I talked to some folks way up north. They're in a moderate overdrafted basin. They actually envisioned a program like this, but they didn't have anything to grab onto. And so they may not be in the first round, they may not be in the second round, but the program could scale to that. We need that feedback, I think, into DWR particularly.
Go ahead. I think just to kind of close this out for the future, in addition to the comment period, so that January 19th deadline in 2023 is a particularly important one because, opening up a workshop for GSAs or for like the technical service providers so Western United Dairy Foundation, along with the Almond Alliance, are both going to be technical service providers, along with Self-Help Enterprises and the California Alliance of Family Farmers, CAF. But I think that the training is important, but thinking about any technology next year or in the future that essentially reduces dependence on high demand from the aquifer. So whether that's, shifting to some new drip technology or shifting crops, or up north, they're not as dependent on groundwater, thinking about expanding Landflex into conservation areas whether that's using reclaimed or recycled water, I think is really going to be important for the successful transition of California agriculture away from as many water intensive uses. And, you talk to the average farmer, they're all for it. They want to know, what tools they might have available in the next 10 years because they're looking to save money and not have to incur such high uncertainty on the waterfront. And the last 2 years in this drought cycle have really shown that our North Coast farms are just as vulnerable to climate change and just a drying and heating climate like the Valley has been under pressure for so long. So thinking about comments from that perspective, but we're really excited about the ability to dial up or dial down any one of these three pillars.
Right. I think I'm excited that it's a new tool in the toolkit. It's a tool that focuses on the water and really allows us all to lean into that solution in a new way. GSAs, farms, communities, it really grabbed the intent of a healthy aquifer and a healthy watershed management, which we need. And I mean, we all hear the chatter about regulatory, and we're all trying to hit those marks. But at the end of the day, we all know what we're after is tools that can get us there. And that's really the concept of this flexibility, the idea of ratcheting up, ratcheting down, and having new tools in the toolkit to do that. I think what's important for folks listening is if you are a member of Western, if you are a member of the Almond Alliance, you'll be receiving updates and schedules constantly. You'll be hearing from us about where we're at in this process, how to be involved, where the information is. Right now, please visit water.ca.gov/Landflex. And a really important thing is farmers listening, go pull that Landflex fact sheet because it has the breakdown of what we just talked about so you can start thinking through land management. We wanted that in your hands before the comment period ended because we know what it means to be crop planning and land planning. And so we're really wanted that information so you can start thinking that through. And I think, Anja, you opened this up with such a great foundation. This is about an immediate drought response to support our rural communities and our underrepresented communities who are at threat of well collapse. We see them reported every day, and rural water systems. But also this is a really great tool for our farmers to envision and our family farms to envision a path forward. We had one farmer who looked at this and said, I can make payroll if I have this program. And that supports our overall communities. That supports our overall economy. And that's truly what water provides. And so we're really excited about this opportunity and so thankful for DWR's willingness to go with us down the rabbit hole in this vision and try something new. I think you said it great in your tweet the other day, just new challenges require new solutions. And we have to start really making this about the water. And I'm really excited about that opportunity. So thank you.
Well, when they decided to commoditize groundwater, they really blew Sigma's implementation out of the water. So it's just a fact when you have a short supply of something, its value goes up astronomically. And then when you have an added drought, you have so many, and then inflationary impacts associated with the pandemic and Ukraine. This has been the perfect storm. And so hopefully this is a solution to keep our rural economies, some intact, because the hidden impact of drought, other than just high prices of food in the store, is really on the rural communities that support. They're the legs we stand on. And so we have to be very sensitive to that. And I think that is often lost. If you're not watching Telemundo or Univision, you don't know that the hidden impact of drought is really about the families that help us manage these farms and work with us every day.
It's you can't, in a drought, I always tell people you don't know where to point a camera. It's not like a hurricane or a tornado where you
people
can just
always want to talk about flood being the biggest threat to California. And they just don't see what we see every day in the Valley.
Yeah.
Or on the farm.
Anywhere, any rural community, north, south. You and I have worked, we're very blessed to have a community that we serve that's very diverse and very spread out in this incredibly beautiful and wondrous place. And I refuse to accept that we can't solve these problems. I refuse to accept that our California farmers can't figure this out better than anybody else if given the tools to do so. So that's what
we're going to continue. I think that, the next version of Landflex 2.0 will probably be different, but I think that anything that's old and binary is not for our organizations. It's not for the up and coming generational farmer. They're ready to sharpen their pencil every single day and get to work. And I respect folks that are tired of having to change, and that every new challenge we have in California, just based on, where we want to sit with California excellence and our supremacy in climate space, has to come from a place of something different. So
in our market,
we're in.
Yeah, we're in. I mean, it's just, we serve the most sophisticated and progressive farmers in the world, who provide the safest, most climate smart agriculture in the world. And the world wants it from us. And so it behooves of us to continue to support those things. And more importantly, that we drive the policy solutions, not have them enforced upon us. I think that's really been the biggest, from your and my perspective as advocates, what has been so powerful about Landflex is it was our industry grabbing an issue and saying, how would we solve the problem? And then taking that and translating that into the policy space and working that relationship. And like you said, multi-prong, solution oriented. That is the way of the future for us as policymakers too. I think is key. And that's what we encourage in our partnerships across the board. So thank you again, Anja, for bringing your unique expertise to the table. I've learned a lot besides your dragging my rear end back to California. But it has been a pleasure doing battle with you, and I would do it with you every day. So thank you so much. And
And thanks to everyone again, DWR. If you guys have questions, I can be reached at Anja, ANJA, at WUDairies, Aubrey.
I'm Aubrey, AUB as in Bravo, REY, at almondalliance.org. And for more information, please sign up, be members of our organizations. We will be providing those updates. Comment period closes December 29th. And if you have any further questions, please reach out to us. Thank you again to our partners. Thank you to Anja. Thank you to CAF and Self-Help, as well as Department of Water Resources for this time and process. More information to come on Landflex. Thank you all for listening. We'll catch you on the other side. Hey, we have had so much fun putting together Almond Alert, and we have a lot more to come. We are booked out for into 2023. It's quite awesome. But we would need to hear from you. What other platforms do you like to see us on? What other platforms do you want to hear us on? We're obviously already on Spotify, YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, of course. But where else do you want to see us? What else do you want to hear? Who else are you interested in? What other content would you like to have? We try to create a platform that's responsive to you as the industry and as the community. And we want to bring you these new and unique folks to provide something of benefit and of value to you too. So please use the comment section. I don't know where it is, down here, out there, up there, or just shoot us an email at almondalliance.org. We'd love to get your feedback and keep bringing you Almond Alert.